This is one goal for every Western Conference team next season. Starting off with the Golden State Warriors. Their goal for next season is pretty straightforward. Just navigate the regular season without injury. This is an older team now. Steph Curry is 37, Jimmy Butler is 36, and Draymond Green is 35. And the reality of the NBA is the older you get, the more injuries play a factor. For Golden State, that problem is even bigger because the roster is still really thin. If they want to stay afloat in what's shaping up to be another brutal Western Conference, their stars are going to have to play some pretty heavy minutes. And that's not exactly ideal for guys in their mid to late 30s. The goal for an older team like this isn't to push for a top seed at all costs. It's more about saving your legs for when it really matters. Golden State hasn't done much to bolster the roster this offseason, so that raises even more concerns. You want your stars to be fresh for a deep playoff run, not worn down from having to grind all regular season. But here's the thing, when this group is on the floor, they are still fantastic. Steph Curry and Jimmy Butler have already proven to be a perfect combo. Curry's numbers went to a new level when Jimmy was next to him, and for Butler, his presence filled every single gap Golden State had before his arrival. He brought the switchable defense, smart and steady playmaking, along with the ability to create tough shots in the clutch, making the Warriors a nightmare to deal with down the stretches of games. Last season, Golden State had a record of 23-7 with Jimmy Butler in the lineup, and that really says it all. But the problem is, if Curry or Butler goes down, this team simply doesn't look anywhere near as dangerous, which is why the Warriors' biggest goal is very simple. Just survive the regular season healthy. Alright, now let's shift over to the Memphis Grizzlies, whose goal is the complete opposite. For Memphis, this next season is all about finding out if their core is actually good enough to win. And if it isn't, they'll need to retool their roster in the following offseason. The Ja Morant-Jaren Jackson duo has its highs and lows. We've seen them as high as the 2 seed in the West, but last season they fell flat, getting bounced out of round 1. Their offense at times looked explosive, but it was their defensive energy that was all over the place. And as the season went on, even the offense that once looked so smooth started to feel clunky as well, especially with Morant frustrated by his drop of usage in favor of Jaren Jackson Jr. All of that bled into the first round defeat where they were simply outclassed by Oklahoma City. Even if Ja and Jaren are both playing at peak performance, it's still hard to picture this group being talented enough to win the West. That's why this year is going to be so crucial. They need to figure out just how far this core can actually take them. And with that recent departure of Desmond Bane to the Magic, I think this team could really get off to quite a slow start. But they do have a stockpile of draft picks to use. If things don't go well this season, and they do get off to a slower start, I'd fully expect Memphis to be aggressive next summer. Now, let's move on to the Denver Nuggets. And for me, their goal is really simple. You've successfully extended your championship window, and now it's time to go out and win again. The Nuggets offseason wasn't flashy, but it was deadly effective. They finally went out and built a stable bench unit, something they've needed badly for years. Last playoffs, their bench was a complete and utter disaster, being outscored by over 30 points per 100 possessions. That isn't just bad, it's borderline unplayable. The good news coming into this season is that the bar was already set so low that even if they don't make a massive improvement off the bench, anything is going to be better than nothing. If that number improves even to a -10, you would see a night and day difference for the team. Think about it. That's an extra 20 points you're not giving up off the bench. Between Jonas Valanciunas, Bruce Brown, Tim Hardaway Jr., and Peyton Watson, I think that's a pretty versatile mix of role players who can at least keep you in games. Whether it's in minutes with Jamal Murray running the second unit or Jokic, I think these players are going to be good enough to keep the Nuggets in more games. Jonas Valanciunas in particular is massive. He gives them a true backup center who can actually take some serious load off the Joker. Last season, Nikola Jokic had to average a career-high 37 minutes a night, which is certainly not ideal from your superstar across an 82-game grind. Cutting that down to 33 or even 34 minutes would make a massive difference when April and May roll around, keeping him fresher and more dangerous when the lights are the brightest. The key with Denver has always been floor spacing around Jokic, and they've also only gotten better in that regard. Gordon and Brown were already elite defensive players, but both of them took massive strides in their three-point shooting last season. Gordon shot an incredible 44% from three last season, including 48% from the corners, and CB scoring doubled while hitting 40% from deep. That was exactly the kind of growth Denver needed from its role players, and why they were able to push the Thunder to a 7-game series despite not having a bench to speak of, because their starting five was truly that good. So think about this. With a better bench that's going to be able to at least tread water, that is only going to make the Nuggets starting five feel even more dangerous. And when you add in the addition of Cam Johnson over Michael Porter Jr., they are going to be borderline unstoppable next season, especially when they get rolling. Now, let's move on to the Dallas Mavericks. And the goal here is a little different. It's all going to be about Cooper Flagg. Next season, I believe Dallas needs to give him real point guard minutes and find out exactly what he's got. Head coach Jason Kidd has already made that clear, planning to test out Flagg at the point guard. And honestly, there's no better time to do so. Kyrie Irving is out with the ACL injury, and there's still no timetable for a possible return. And while they did sign D'Angelo Russell, I don't think he's the guy you want to give all of the ball handling and playmaking responsibilities to in a starting five. So that leaves a big opening. And for me, Cooper Flagg should be getting the majority of these minutes. Even if it is rocky to start the season, Dallas needs to stick with it because the long-term prize is far too important. Jason Kidd has done this exact thing before. He gave Giannis the ball in Milwaukee and forced him to learn point guard skills early in his career. People call Giannis the run and dunk guy, but the only reason he ever got the name run was because he learned how to handle, how to create, and how to read defenses with the ball in his hands. I think Cooper Flagg needs the same treatment. His rookie year should be all about putting him through the fire, making him uncomfortable, giving him tough matchups, and letting him fail so that over time he grows into that kind of do-it-all player that could potentially lead Dallas to a ton of success down the road. Now, let's talk about the Minnesota Timberwolves. And for me, their biggest goal next season is pretty clear. It's time to take the next step offensively. We already know this is one of the best defensive teams in the league, arguably the best. But if they want to actually win the West, they just have to be better offensively. And while I am talking about the whole team here, there's one guy this all really comes down to, Anthony Edwards. I've talked about this in previous videos, but I'm going to mention it again. I believe the Ant-Man needs to become a far better playmaker. Edwards is already one of the best scorers in the league, and last postseason, that was good enough to make back-to-back Western Conference Finals appearances. But once he got there, that's when the real crossroads emerged. OKC's defense was just too good. They trapped him, they rotated perfectly, and they forced him into spots that he just wasn't comfortable with. And the truth is, Edwards just was not ready for the moment. His scoring ability is elite, but the playmaking for others still lags behind. And when Oklahoma City forced him to try and read the floor and make those right passes, he just could not do it consistently enough at a high level. And that was a massive reason as to why the Wolves lost that series in just 5 games. So this offseason needed to be tailored towards playmaking, evolving into not just a scorer who can can average 28 a night, but a playmaker who bends defenses and creates easy looks for teammates. If he can take that leap, everything changes for the Wolves, because they already have a defense good enough to win a championship, with Rudy Gobert protecting the rim, Jaden McDaniels locking up on the perimeter, and the physical swarming style that they play. If the offense can just catch up, Minnesota goes from a team that looks really good to a true title favorite. Now, let's look at the New Orleans Pelicans. And the goal here is almost the opposite. It's about figuring out what exactly they're trying to do, because right now, the Pelicans feel stuck between two worlds. On one hand, they are clearly not rebuilding. They've doubled down, added more pieces this offseason, and handed Zion Williamson the full keys to the franchise with a massive contract. But on the other hand, even with those moves, the roster just isn't good enough to really compete in the West. So it begs the question, what are they actually doing here? If I'm being honest, I don't think the Pelicans themselves even know that answer. And that is why this season feels crucial. If things go south early, don't be surprised if we start hearing trade rumors surrounding Zion as the deadline approaches. Because right now, the vision of building a contender around him just doesn't feel even close to being a realistic idea. And if health is again another issue, then New Orleans is going to have to face the truth perhaps sooner than they hoped. Now, let's take a look at the reigning champion, Oklahoma City Thunder. And their goal is as simple as it gets. It's time to go back to back. They're in a rare position in today's NBA, because under the new CBA, it's becoming harder and harder to keep a title team together, but the Thunder just pulled it off, thanks to so many of their key guys still being on rookie scale contracts. The entire playoff rotation is back, and that is going to be massive. People forget that this team nearly won 70 games last season, despite having brutal injuries. There were long stretches where they didn't have both Isaiah Hartenstein and Chet Holmgren, as at one point they were relying on J-Dub to run the center minutes. That's how badly things got. However, none of this mattered, as they just continued to win. Now picture that same group with, fingers crossed, better luck on the health side of things, allowing Chet Holmgren to take a massive leap. That is going to be a team that could genuinely win 70 next season. Of course, the one weakness they showed in the playoffs was their offense. As incredible as the defense was, sometimes it wasn't good enough to cover for their horrendous offensive stretches where they couldn't generate a good look. So that's why next season, I think an offensive improvement has to be the number one focus. Because in a playoff series against somebody like Kevin Durant, who the Rockets just added, defense alone is simply not going to cut it, because Kevin Durant can just rise up over the top and score over anyone. So that's the challenge for Oklahoma City. Fix your half-court offense. Keep the defense where it is, and if they can do that, they'll be right back on top. But the scary thing is, this team is still so young. SGA is just entering his prime, and J-Dub and Chet Holmgren haven't even hit theirs yet. Last year might have been the best chance to knock them off, because now they've got the belief. They have the proof, while also just getting started. This season could be about making history, becoming the first team to go back-to-back since the Kevin Durant-led Warriors in 2018, and officially cementing themselves as the true dynasty of the 2020s. Now, let's have a look at the Los Angeles Lakers. And for me, their goal next season has to be making this Luka Doncic's team moving forward. When Luka arrived last year in that shock move, it did already feel like he was the number one option from the second he put on the purple and gold. But LeBron was still doing a lot. And to be fair, he kind of had to, because Luka wasn't in peak shape just yet. Even so, a slightly out of shape Luka was still better than 99% of the NBA. And that showed, averaging 28.2 points per game on 53% effective field goal shooting. But this offseason just feels different. After being publicly called out by Dallas for his conditioning before the trade, Luka's been on a mission this offseason. Reports say he's getting into the best shape of his career. And honestly, it feels like we're headed for a full-blown revenge tour. I genuinely think there's a world where he could average a 30-point triple-double next season. And if that happens, not only will the Lakers climb the standings, but Luka could also take home the MVP, reminding everybody why he is, at the bare minimum, a top 4 player in the league, which is exactly why the Lakers need to fully hand him the reins. You've now got to surround him with players who actually fit his style. Long, athletic, defensively minded guys who thrive as lob threats and rim protectors in pick and roll situations. That is when Luka is at his absolute best. The Dallas Mavericks figured out how to do this perfectly when they made the finals, surrounding him with guys like PJ Washington, Derek Lively, Daniel Gafford, and Derek Jones Jr. The Lakers, though, they just don't have anybody on the roster like that right now. It definitely still feels like Los Angeles is waiting for LeBron to retire before they actually move into the next era. But for me, I don't think they can afford to wait, because there's no guarantee that Luka's ever going to have a running mate as good as a year 23 LeBron James. So the time is absolutely now to make this Luka's team and to surround him with the pieces he needs to compete for a championship. Now let's move on to the other Los Angeles team, the Clippers. And for me, their goal is to just stay healthy. This is by far the oldest team in the NBA next season, and with age comes risk. Kawhi Leonard, even if he is healthy right now, we all know he's going to miss stretches next season. That's just a given at this point. Then you've got James Harden, Bradley Beal, Chris Paul, and Brook Lopez. All guys who are getting up there in age and have their own individual injury concerns. When this group is actually on the floor together, though, there's no doubt that they're going to be really good. They've got the skill, shooting, playmaking, and plenty of playoff experience. But the problem is just going to be keeping them on the floor. And that's why I think the beginning to next season is going to be absolutely crucial. If the Clippers can come out hot and rack up some good wins early, it'll give them more breathing room for later in the season, where they can rest their stars and not have to worry about battling for their playoff lives. But if they stumble out of the gates and find themselves just fighting to even be 500, it's going to be a nightmare scenario, because from then, every game down the stretch is going to be a must win, and you cannot expect this group to survive that kind of a grind and then still have enough left in the tank for a deep playoff run. It's just not going to happen. Honestly, I think we'll know about 15 games into next season whether or not the Clippers can win it all. If they're sitting around 10-5, the conversation shifts, and suddenly I think they are a very dangerous team, good enough to beat anybody. But if they fall to 7-8 or something around that area, then I think we can basically count them out, and I'm being dead serious. Next season, the West is just going to be far too good to mess around at any point and not pay the price later in the season. And for the Clippers, their age is just a massive concern, so staying healthy has to be priority number one. Now let's move on to the Phoenix Suns. And for me, their goal for next season is to figure it all out and finally pick a direction, because as of right now, they're just wandering. Last season was nothing short of a train wreck. On paper, that team should have been good enough to lock in a playoff spot, but in reality, they didn't even make the play-in tournament. Kevin Durant is gone, Bradley Beal is gone, and to make it worse, the Suns got nothing for Beal, ultimately having to buy him out, which means they're still paying him big money for the next few years, even though he's not on the roster. Now, I'm not saying they shouldn't have bought him out, because it was for sure the right decision, but it just shows you how poor of an idea it was to trade for him in the first place. Devin Booker and Jalen Green in the backcourt is going to be interesting to say the least, and maybe Green does develop into something real, but even if he does, is that truly the kind of guy you want next to Booker? For me, it just feels like another overlapping problem. So Phoenix has to decide, are you trying to retool around Devin Booker, or are you blowing it all up and starting from scratch? Because right now, I think they're doing neither. They're just kicking the can down the road, stuck in the middle with no clear path forward, no direction. It's either time to give up on the Devin Booker era and focus on trying to develop these young guys, or try and boost the value of these young guys to flip them for pieces that would actually make sense next to Devin Booker to try and compete in the Western Conference once again. But if this season concludes and nothing happens that makes it clear as to what their plan is, then it's a complete and utter disaster. Something has to change, and it has to change now. Now, let's take a look at the Portland Trail Blazers. And for me, the goal here is to just keep leaning into the defensive mindset that made them competitive down the stretch of last season. They've got a young core that showed off some real promise, finishing last season on a 22-18 record while ranking top 5 in defensive rating. Of course, Damian Lillard is back on a 3-year deal, but with him missing this season due to an Achilles injury, his role will mostly be as a mentor for this group. Then, when you add in other veterans like Drew Holiday, alongside the defensive standouts like Tamani Kamara, Donovan Clingan, and offensive standout Hanson Yang, it just feels like a team that should continue to experiment and figure out exactly what they have before Damian Lillard returns. Now, let's move on to the Kings. And honestly, their goal's pretty simple. Figure it out. This team has no clear direction, very similar to what we're seeing out of the Pelicans and Suns right now. After trading away De'Aaron Fox and firing Mike Brown mid-season last year, it's hard to say what the point of those decisions were. Just 3 seasons ago, they were the 3 seed in the West, looking like one of the more exciting up-and-coming teams in that conference. But now, they've dropped right back down to the middle of the road. To me, it's obvious that they should blow it up and rebuild, but I feel like they're trying to retool this roster, which we already seen doesn't work. They just rebuilt the 2022 Chicago Bulls West Edition, pairing DeMar DeRozan with Zach LaVine once again, and even if everything breaks right, that combination just clearly isn't good enough to win the West. So I think a decision needs to be made, and it's got to be the other option of what they just picked. But I've got very little faith that we're going to see the Kings actually make the right decision, because recent rumors sees them trying to move off from Malik Monk to bring in Russell Westbrook. Yes, you heard that right. We don't want Malik Monk. Give us Russell Westbrook. That's basically all you need to know about the Kings at the moment, and why I think they might be the most lost franchise in the league right now. Now, let's take a look at the San Antonio Spurs. And for me, their goal next season is to discover whether or not this team is ready to compete, or if they should continue to build. A lot of this comes down to the play of Victor Wembanyama in year 3. His sophomore season was cut short after just 46 games, but when he was on the court, he was already putting up superstar level numbers of 24 points, 11 rebounds, and nearly 4 blocks a game, while making the team about 10 points better when he was on the court. If he stays healthy and keeps getting better, Wemby could realistically be in the MVP conversation next season. But the big difference now is that he finally has a good enough running mate with De'Aaron Fox, who not long ago almost led the league in scoring. Pairing those two together could push the Spurs into playoff territory already. Then add in Dylan Harper, the second overall pick, and this group could be ready to take the leap now. The only question is whether they should. Is it smarter to compete now, or to build towards an even wider and more sustained window down the road? For me, I think I would continue to build, but this is a decision San Antonio might be forced into making if Wemby is truly that good, where he pushes them up the West and earns them a really high seed. But for me though, I just think the supporting cast of the Spurs just isn't good enough yet, no matter how well Wemby plays. But all of this is just speculation. We really have to wait and see with this Spurs team. Now, let's take a very brief look at the Utah Jazz. The goal here is to get to the bottom of the standings, plain and simple. Last season, they were openly tanking, and this year, they came out and said that they aren't. That had a lot of people raising their eyebrows, as people thought, wait, they're gonna try and win? Well, no, that isn't what they meant. They meant that the roster is now so bad that they're not even going to have to try to lose games. They're just going to be that bad. For Utah, as strange as this is going to sound, that's the best possible outcome right now. Stay bad and continue to be bad, landing another high pick to help speed up this rebuild. Alright, now let's talk about the Houston Rockets. And for me, their goal next season is pretty clear, and it's about maintaining the balance. They obviously could get better offensively, which I think is absolutely going to happen with the addition of Kevin Durant, but they can't afford to get worse defensively at the same time, because that's what made them so dangerous last season. Defense was the team's calling card, and it's what turned them into one of the most feared young groups in the NBA, and that part of their game has to stay if they actually want to win it all next season. The good news is, I don't think losing their defense is a real concern. The roster is completely loaded with athletes and defensively minded players like Amen Thompson, Tari Eason, and now Dorian Finney-Smith, who I believe are all going to be good enough to keep the Rockets a really good defensive team. Where I see the big leap coming out of Houston, though, is in the clutch. Last year, the Rockets defense carried them into a ton of close games, but they simply didn't have a guy to close them out at the highest level. Despite that, though, they still managed a 26-18 record in the clutch, which is a 59% win rate, which is still really good. But now, if you're handing the ball to Kevin Durant in those same situations, that could potentially make the Rockets unbeatable in the clutch. If that win rate jumps up to even 70%, which I think is completely realistic with the addition of KD, then they could easily be pushing 60 wins. And honestly, I think that's exactly where this team is headed. This Rockets group looks like a legitimate contender, and I can definitely see them battling Oklahoma City for that top spot in the West all season long. But their foundation must stay the same. Defense comes first, while you have Durant in your back pocket to close out games down the stretch. If they can find that balance, incorporate Kevin Durant offensively in a way that doesn't step on the toes of guys like Amen Thompson and Alperen Şengün, then Houston might not just be a fun young team anymore. They could actually be the team standing in the way of the Oklahoma City Thunder from being able to go back-to-back. But how realistic is the Rockets' chances of actually winning the title next season? If you want to learn more, you can see this full breakdown on every NBA team's most realistic path to the championship right now.